The Speedy World. I'm SYED and you're watching Fault Lines. The war between Russia and Ukraine is taking interesting twists and turns every time. Since we covered this issue last time, 15 days ago, there have been 4 major developments that we wanted to update our viewers about. First and foremost is the recent issue of drone boats being used against the Navy of Russia in the Black Sea. These naval boats, these drone boats, were coordinated and assisted by airborne drones that attacked the naval fleet of Russia. Russia has blamed that the British Navy was involved behind the orchestration of these attacks. British government has categorically denied these allegations. The rest of the West is silent on these allegations. Second and more important issue is Russia's increasingly loose grip on the 4 regions of Ukraine that it has occupied and made a part of Russian Federation. Most importantly, the region of Kherson is apparently looking to slip out of hands. Third and an even more critical issue is the use of smart artillery used by Ukraine that is outmaneuvering Russia's use of its old artillery. And now it is becoming increasingly evident that Ukraine's artillery is quite capable of beating the defense lines of Russia, which is becoming an increasingly bigger problem for Russia with each passing day. Last but not the least is the recent statement of IAEA that has categorically rejected the allegations of use of a dirty bomb from either of the sides. Our team has prepared a package. Watch the package before we bring our first guest to the program.
Over 8 months since Russia's full-scale invasion, Ukraine has become the stage upon which multiple battles are being fought. Ukraine crisis is dominating the 2-day meeting of U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken with the G7 counterparts in the western German city of Munster. The UN Security Council overwhelmingly rejected Russia's attempt to establish a commission to investigate its claims that Ukraine and the United States are carrying out military biological activities. Russian attacks were reported across large areas of Ukraine with heavy shelling in numerous regions damaging key energy infrastructure. Ukraine nuclear firm Energoatom reported that Europe's largest nuclear power plant has again been disconnected from the power grid after Russian shelling damaged the remaining high-voltage lines, leaving it with just diesel generators. Underlining result of robust diplomatic efforts, 7 ships carrying agricultural products left Ukrainian Black Sea ports a day after resumption of grain deal aimed at delivering Ukrainian food to foreign markets. Kremlin stated that Russia would resume its participation in grain deal to free up vital grain exports from war-torn Ukraine after suspending it over the weekend in a move that threatened to exacerbate hunger across the world. Ukraine has become the pivot point for so many of the world's geopolitical tensions with grave and far-reaching consequences.
To talk about this very pertinent issue, my first guest in the program is joining me from United Kingdom. He is James Carey, Roosevelt Scholar from Cambridge University. Mr. Carey, welcome to the show once again.
Thank you for having me back.
Mr. Carey, there have been so many developments since we spoke last time. One of the most important developments that we are increasingly worried about is Russia's losing grip on the 4 regions that it has occupied. Most of all, Kherson region that we can clearly see Russia's military is losing a hold on. We're concerned about it because Russia has declared these 4 regions to be a part of Russian Federation. How do you comment on this?
Well, I think what's going on in these 4 regions, and you refer specifically to Kherson here, is the effects that Russia is feeling of prematurely declaring them sovereign territory. In theoretical terms, necessary requirements for declaring a part of territory, part of your sovereign territory, are quite numerous and quite pervasive, and also set quite a high bar. And what we're seeing the rejection from the international community largely of their claims of these 4 regions being part of the Russian Federation. And consequently, because of that, and the failed attempts to convince the world by Russia through the referendums that they apparently held in these four regions, we're starting to see that the military infrastructure that had been claimed that was there to ensure that they could hold these regions actually functionally isn't there at all. If you take Kherson as an example, as probably the prime example here, we are getting reports of residents describing what can only be described as a reign of terror under Russian rule. And the declaration by President Putin of martial law in these regions probably will only seek to exacerbate these conditions. President Zelensky of Ukraine has described effectively a dismantling in these four regions of, for example, the medical system used by everyday citizens, regardless of whether they are Ukrainian or Russian. That is not a situation in which we want to find ourselves in. And so consequently, I think what we're seeing the stretching of the limits of the Russian military beyond its capability. This Russian military was never set up and never resourced to be able to police domestic environments. That was not what the special military operation, as Putin has called it, was designed to do. And consequently, we're seeing the signification of the inability to control these regions and police them effectively. So I think what that will effectively lead to, and it's been reported fairly widely, is a Russian retreat from at least Kherson, which is a significant development for the Russian military.
But how would be this taken back in Russia? Because recently it was declared a part of Russian Federation. And now if the Russian military is on the go and they're being retreated or they're retreating from there, we have seen the military advantages that Ukraine is using. What would be the political fallout impact? I'm sure Putin is not going to take it for free. He's going to certainly retaliate on this major development. It's going to have political implications for him.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's a very good point to raise here. Firstly, when one declares a particular territory sovereign, one can almost never do that unilaterally. There are often requirements for you to have allies in the international community, for you to seek out a majority or fairly close to it at the United Nations to agree with you on the ascension of that territory to be included in your sovereign territory. But to your point there, it's very true that this will have far-reaching political implications and military implications as well. The political implications of taking back territory that Putin can point to and say, but I held these referendums, suggests actually that those referendums don't hold much sway in much of the Western world, and possibly as well will seek to be used in any negotiation further down the line as evidence of an attempt to find a diplomatic solution by the Russian Federation.
Mr. Kerry, I was just going through an international paper which has been recently published by Cambridge University. And the paper actually covers two major aspects of the problem that Russia is facing at the moment. One of the factors is that the Russians are not welcomed. They believed they would be welcomed. That is what at least they were told. So the hostile environment of Ukraine is something they were not anticipating at the moment. And the second problem is that increasing capability or the increasing smart use of the artillery by Ukraine is actually creating larger problems, larger issues for Russian military. How do you see this use of a smart artillery weapon that is outmaneuvering and outperforming the Russian artillery?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I've not read the paper specifically, but those two aspects are aspects that have been very widely reported as to reasoning for Ukraine's ability to produce this rather effective counteroffensive that they've now been engaged in the eastern part of Ukraine. Ukraine has been able to take in progressively more and more and higher powered Western military capabilities. They've been successfully able to convince the West, and that being the US, the UK, and the European Union and its major members, of the importance of holding Ukraine, of the importance of having that barrier between the West and Russia. And so consequently, using the appeals that Zelensky has been able to, he's been able to now get weapons that are of very high capability. This weaponry that Ukraine is using is easily trainable, it's easily usable, and it's easily deployable. And consequently, what that means is that Russia's techniques to seek out and find where Ukrainian artillery and military positions were in the past are now not as effective in the present. And that is producing a situation where, as you say, we're getting incredible footage of Ukrainian artillery being able to seek Russian hardware across large swathes of battlefield that they wouldn't have had the ability to do otherwise. The impact of this on the war is, of course, that consequently Russia's ability to deploy troops safely, and especially troops now that have having less and less training before going to the battlefield, is increasingly scant. It's decreasing day by day, week by week. And all of this means that suddenly supply chains get stretched, but also command chains get stretched as well. So what we're seeing is significant loss of life and loss of military position, where Russia would not have given up those positions 6 months ago.
Mr. Kerry, one other important factor that we are observing here is that the drafting of soldiers in Russia is not also very well received. Not only this war, but also many other major wars that we have seen in the past. We have observed that the polity has not been as excited as the politicians themselves with regards to the larger wars. So we didn't find Russians very excited about the idea of unifying back with Ukraine. Many Russians have tried to leave the country, and there have been contradicting reports published by international media, but Russian media has declined their authenticity. Now tell me, how serious of an issue is this drafting of forces and then their casualties being reported or remaining underreported? How serious of an issue can this be for Russians?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think what you allude to there is the duality of the problem that's faced by the Russian government and military here, which is on one hand the political and on the other hand the military, the war effort. I'll take the war effort first because that's somewhat easier to explain, which is that when you put men and women into a battlefield situation, be it as a supply chain or as a frontline fighter, when you put people into the battlefield that have not had the training of your previous military units, you are going to see a less than optimal performance. That's just fundamentally the truth, and it's regardless of the conflict and regardless of the timing. Good soldiers require good training, and good training takes time. And that's one thing that Russia hasn't been able to invest into these men that they've been able to draft. The reports on the number of men that were actually successfully drafted varies quite significantly. But regardless of the number, you've got many, many tens of thousands of men who are going to the front line, who fundamentally have not been trained to do that job. That is going to produce a significant number of issues across the battlefield because they're underprepared. On the political side of this, which you alluded to in the question, I think this is a more interesting development because what it has fundamentally shown, and perhaps inadvertently by President Putin, is the sheer unpopularity of sending men to the front. Now, the percentage...
Mr. Kerry, can I hold you here? We need to take a break here and join back after a small break. We'll continue the conversation from here. Stay with us. Welcome back, and we continue the very interesting conversation with regards to the drafting of soldiers by the Russian side with Mr. James Kerry. Mr. Kerry, can you continue what you were saying?
Previously, before the news break, about the military aspect of it, but the political aspect of it is just as interesting, and perhaps more so, because I think with the rejection, the large scale rejection by lots of people in Russia to being drafted, and you can see this from the long lines that you were alluding to in the question before the break, highlights that to a certain level there is a rejection of this by the Russian people, and as you went back to earlier, there's a sense of the Russian people being told that they would be welcomed in Ukraine, and having witnessed that that isn't the case, there is a large-scale political backlash to this that may end up affecting Russian politics in more deeper ways than we can currently comprehend in the future. And I think that's going to be one of the really interesting things from the end of this conflict.
Now, meanwhile, in order to compensate the damages or to increase the casualty of wars for Ukraine, what Russia has started doing is to target the utilities. This is the electricity and the water supply system of the major cities, which has created an energy crisis, particularly at the time when winter has almost started. The harshness of winter might not have kicked in as yet, but the winters have officially started. How do you see this strategy, and what do you believe Russia is trying to accomplish out of it?
Well, it's a really interesting. I mean, it's a fairly fundamental strategy to warfare, which is degrade your opponent's ability to increase their ability to strike back at you. And in certain circumstances, it very much is a legitimate military target to target energy supplies, because you can legitimately claim that they are used to power targeting, they are used to target services that enhance the military, they are used in all sorts of ways by the military. However, where this is somewhat strayed now, and what is lending some credence to Zelensky's claim of what he's described as Russian terrorism here, is that these seem to be very large-scale attacks on both water and electricity. And that fundamentally takes it into a position of, well, answering the question of what it could accomplish, which is when you degrade a singular ability to live like this, what you fundamentally do is you reduce the resistance to any particular outcome. And what we might be seeing here is Russia's attempt to be able to move towards a negotiated solution through large-scale attacks that fundamentally undermine the rest of Ukraine's ability to live peacefully and peaceably. And I think that is really what's really what's being attempted here is, as you say, the ability to increase the level of discomfort without increasing the level of significant casualties of a civilian nature.
And Mr. Kerry, one important thing that Russia is also trying to accomplish while doing what we just discussed is to target the unison of European nations, be it NATO, be it European Union. It's broadly the unison of European nations. That is the target of the Russian strategy. And I'm saying this because already the protests have started to break in various European countries, starting from Germany, with the energy crisis exacerbating with the beginning of winters, which also have a lot of economic cost associated with it. Do you see Europe surviving this harsh winters without Russian gas and surviving the economic consequences of it as well? Because this is what Russia is really banking on.
Yeah, I think to take the subtext there, Europe will survive. There's no doubt about that. The continent of Europe will still be there come spring next year. But I think the subtext being that will we see a fundamentally more unified or similarly unified Europe is an interesting question. And as you point to, there are already vast conditions that have fundamentally affected people's lives in Europe. Here in the UK, we have quite high levels of inflation at the moment, and energy prices look to be spiking. What's fundamentally being created is now the race to be able to replace the 130 billion cubic meters of natural gas imports from Russia within a year. And whilst there have been reasonable attempts to do that, there have been reasonable things that we could fundamentally do, as in increasing gas production in the Netherlands and in Scotland. The idea that it's going to be completely replaced is fanciful, and consequently that means there have to be other solutions, and other solutions may be found. But what we might start to see is a fracturing of the European Union, not necessarily in the Union itself, but a divergence in the different types of domestic solutions found. And this is where you might get intra-European fracturing, where different countries effectively look on with envy at certain wealthier or better prepared states who are more able to fend through this, what will be a really tough winter, both economically and for gas supplies. So I think,
thank you very much, James Gary, for again being guest in our show.
Thanks for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was Mr. James Gary, and he has some very important and pertinent points that he have pointed out. Most important thing came towards the end of his talk when where he pointed out that these are certainly the most difficult winters for the entire of Europe. And if Europe can somehow survive the challenges that winter has set forth in absence of Russian gas reserves available for consumption, then the problems are going to complicate further for Russia. But this if is a million-dollar question. Now, moving toward the second part of our program, ladies and gentlemen, you are aware that that Prime Minister of Pakistan, Mr. Shahbaz Sharif, recently had a visit of China. This was his maiden visit, his debut visit of China, where he met the top leadership of the country, President Xi Jinping, congratulated him on his re-election as the president, once again, as the Secretary General of Congress. Of the ruling party, and more importantly also spoke about various opportunities that both the countries have while going forward. We all understand the significance of CPEC. We all understand that China and Pakistan are time-tested partners, particularly with regards to the recent strategic developments that are taking place, the geopolitical developments that are taking place in this region. Pakistan's significance has many times increased for China. And Pakistan is not only quite aware of the fact, but also going to welcome the opportunities that have been extended with all these geopolitical developments in the region. Our team has prepared a package. Watch the package before I introduce my first guest in this part of my program.
China-Pakistan Eternal Friendship Manifest, ideal case of interstate relations as the two nations have stood firmly side by side in realizing their shared vision of peace, stability, development and prosperity. For Pakistan, relations with China form the cornerstone of our foreign policy, and Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif has arrived in Pakistan after completing his promising two-day official visit to China. China has always placed Pakistan as a priority in its neighborhood diplomacy, and during meeting with Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif, President Xi Jinping has assured that China will continue to support Pakistan to help stabilize its economy. Chinese President Xi Jinping emphasized to make full use of Joint Cooperation Committee or CPEC, advanced CPEC with greater efficiency, accelerate construction of auxiliary infrastructure for Gawad Port, create conditions for early implementation of upgradation of ML1 and Karachi Circular railway project to unleash its role in driving interconnected development in the region. During meeting between Prime Minister Shahbaz and Chinese Premier Li Keqiang, both sides agreed to speed up efforts to build a closer China-Pakistan community with a shared future in the new era and inject new impetus into their all-weather strategic cooperative partnership. The central banks of Pakistan and China signed a memorandum of cooperation on yuan clearing in Pakistan, and this arrangement could pave the way for an alternative payment option for Pakistan. Facing a highly uncertain world, Sino-Pak axis stand on the right side of history, keeping up their strong cooperation in multilateral mechanisms and working closely on major international and regional issues.
To join me in this segment of program, my first guest is Mr. Mia Ebrar. He is a resident editor of Pakistan Today, is also an expert of Chinese affairs. Mia Ebrar Sahab, welcome to the show. Mia Ebrar Sahab, welcome to the show. I couldn't hear you.
Thank you. Are you listening to me?
Yeah. Ebrar Sahab, taking advantage of your presence in the program, I would like to highlight some issues that have remained widely unattended during the media discourse around the subject of Pakistan's Prime Minister's visit to China. So help us to understand the political involvement of China with the re-election of President Xi Jinping, who, according to the news that I've read, has been elected as Secretary General of 20th Central Committee of Communist Party of China. We are also reading that this actually makes him one of the biggest leaders in the history of the country. But I actually cannot comprehend why is it so significant for China to have President Xi Jinping to this portfolio. Help us to understand a bit of background before we start talking about further issues related to the subject.
Thank you, Mr. Shabat. We have to see the situation in a holistic, background. If you see the global environment and the challenges faced by the world economies around the world, you can understand better that China right now, coming out of COVID, China has, adopted a zero COVID policy. And during the past 2 years, China's economic, development and growth was a bit slow. So now, entering into the new era, China faces numerous challenges, not across the globe, but also internally, and especially taking back on track the country's economy. While you see that in the region there is a Russian-Ukraine war, and diplomatically China has been dealing it very smartly, very diplomatically. China has kept it in its relations with the world. Now, if you see at CPC, CPC is the backbone of China's economy and politics and everything. So the recent elections have brought new impetus into the China as a nation, also and China's politics and economy as well. So if we see it, it is actually the party elections, not government elections. Government elections are going to be held next year in February or January or March. The two sessions are going to elect the new leadership of China. So we have to understand that this is the CPC which has been going through its elections, and CPC's entire leadership has been brought, new faces have been brought to the core. If you understand, if you see the CPC top leadership, it is led by General Secretary and Political Bureau Standing Committee, which comprises of 7 individuals and the General Secretary. So it is also called Politburo Standing Committee. So these are the 7 gentlemen who actually are the face of the leadership of China, politically and in all means, because now General Secretary also commands the China's military commission. So after under the China's Politburo standing committee, there is political bureau that comprises of normally 25 people, but this year 24 people are members of China's political bureau. So under China Political Bureau, there is a central committee and it comprises of 200 individuals. So these 200 individuals come from various parts of country and they are the top leadership of China. Then under Political Bureau, there is, you know, alternate, sorry, under the central committee, there is an alter members, 100 alternate members. So if anybody, faces any health issues or any other issues, so these alternate members come up and join the central committee. Then under the central committee, there is NPC and National People.
Ibrar Sahab, if I can cut you here and just to keep it a bit comprehensive, we understand the structure of Chinese politics and the political parties quite complicated to understand, and it takes some time and expertise to understand it, which you certainly have. But my broadly question is, how significant is the re-election of President Xi Jinping as a leader? Because we are, I mean, the entire international media is abuzz with people saying that he has become third most important leader in the history of this country. Why do people say that? What makes him third greatest leader of the history of the country?
Yes, actually, if you see in the history, China's history, Mao Zedong was chairman, and after that, they have seized the office of chairman only for Mao Zedong. Then General Secretary Deng Xiaoping, actually, he led the this industrial revolution in China, and that's why he is regarded as a second god of China. Now, Xi Jinping comes when, China faces, not only China has become the number two, world economy, but also China faces so many challenges on, globally, and you better understand that if you see the recent, trade war with US, so US is, along with its Western, allies, they are actually posing a challenge to stall the peaceful rise of China. Now, China historically is very peaceful country. Over the past 6,000 years, China has not attacked any state, any sovereign state. China has never attacked or threatened any state. Now, China is being threatened again. China has been time and again threatened in the First World War, Second World War. China has been, foreign invaders have occupied parts of China. China is, so history of China tells that China is very peaceful state. But now China's again threatened because China's peaceful rise has not gone well with the West and its allies. So at this juncture, Xi Jinping comes, and Xi Jinping is very wise, very visionary, and the two centenary goals he set for China. You must have heard of Chinese dream. So he talks about, making China the most prosperous nation of the world. And the first centenary goal was to, fight against poverty and bring poor people out of, poverty. And China has done this miracle of pulling out 800 million people out of poverty. Now, the second major success Xi Jinping has got is the fight against corruption. You know that in China, there is only one party system, and that is CPC. So it is always easy to impound corrupt people out of party. But within the party, it's very brave. One needs to have a very big heart to, arrest and the surge of corruption within the party system and within his own allies and within his party comrades. So he is such a brave person that he has not only, impounded his close aides, but also other party people at all levels. And this, they use terms like flies, like dragons. So the big party office bearers are called dragons, and a small party, lower party cadre is called flies. So is the
Ibrar Sahab, you have
president.
just hit the nail on its head. And this actually brings me to my last question. And that is that at this specific juncture of time, when China has the third largest leader of their democratic history, how important is for Pakistan to strengthen its already strengthened relationship, to further strengthen the relationship with China, and to be a part of this huge dream that China is pursuing of a peaceful economic, political rise? How pertinent is it for Pakistan to be a part of this ambition?
Shabat, you need to know first what is the second centenary goal of China. Second centenary goal has been set of 2049. 2049 is the time that China, dreams to become the most powerful nation on earth. But I think that the way China has attained its first centenary goal before 2021, the goal was 2021, but they attained it in 2020. So 2049 is far ahead, and I think under President Xi Jinping, China is going to attain this goal even before. And to coming back to your question, Pakistan, has a history of being allied with China, and this is so fortunate for Pakistan that Pakistan has been an all-weather ally of China, and in regional context and in the global context, it is best for Pakistan to always stand by China, and because China is only nation in the world which is sharing the fruits of development with the world, and they are trying to shape up a community of a shared destiny for the mankind. So Pakistan could be the most beneficial nation because Pakistan has this CPAC, which is the flagship project of the BRI, which actually is the instrument of sharing the fruits of development with the world. So Pakistan can become the first nation on earth which can directly benefit from the China's peaceful rise and peaceful development. So this would not only support Pakistan economically, but also in the strategic development and in financial terms and also in political terms globally.
Thank you very much, Mia Brasha, for being guest in our program today.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was Mia Brasha, and like always, he has a lot of things to share with us, things that we normally do not hear in the mainstream media. My second guest is already sitting in the studio, Mr. Faizan Fakhr, who's going to take the conversation onward from here. He's an independent research analyst based in Islamabad. Faizan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Mia Ibrar Saab pointed out a number of things. He said this is very ripe time for Pakistan because China has one of the biggest leaders of their history. China is on course to be one of the most, rather the most strong economic power by 2049, and Pakistan being in the neighborhood has all the luxuries to avail. How would you comment on it?
Thank you so much, Abad, for that question. I think this is a very pertinent question to ask, especially in the context of the visit of Prime Minister to China. We have to understand that this visit comes at a very crucial time. Pakistan right now, it's not a secret that we are going through some very, severe crisis in terms of our economic conditions, in terms of our political and social situation that we are facing right now. So at this time, Prime Minister's visit to China is certainly going to be a very welcoming development. Specifically in terms of the stated motto of this visit is rejuvenation and kind of a refocus on the development projects of China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Now, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor being the flagship project of China's BRI initiative is very crucial, not only in the regional terms but also in the global terms. And Pakistan has nothing but to gain a lot of benefits from this project. It's very unfortunate that amongst the common masses there is a familiarity with the project of CPEC. I mean, everybody is familiar with the name. But when it comes to the details of the project, I somehow feel that people...
It's not as well understood as we might.
Yes. there are some confusions, there are some speculations, there are some misperceptions. So we really need to understand that this is one of the projects which is only going to benefit us. It's, of course, it's going to benefit both sides. It's going to benefit China, it's going to benefit Pakistan as well. But we have nothing but to gain benefits from this project.
But Faizan, when we talk about CPAC, people at large know that it's a very important project, but do not know exactly how it is going to change the future for this country.
Right.
Help us to understand in a smaller explanation. How do you, I mean, if you have to explain this to a person who doesn't know anything about it, how would you explain CPAC's significance for Pakistan in a minute?
Okay, so I think the devil lies in the details.
Okay.
We really need to understand the details of the project. And I have to be very brief about it since you mentioned. I think the name itself implies that it is China-Pakistan economic corridor. So primarily it is an economic cooperation between two nations of Pakistan and China. But we really need to understand that Pakistan and China, at the heart of it, we are strategic partners. So whatever we do, whatever kind of collaboration or cooperation we have, there is going to be a strategic component to it as well. Now coming back to the second part of the question, what exactly is CPAC, right? You see, CPAC is not just a corridor. I mean, the common perception that I get from people often is that maybe it's just a roadway which is going to connect Pakistan with China somehow through, a roadway which is going to come from China till Gwadar, but that's not the case. It's a framework of investment. It is an all-encompassing framework of investments. It includes investments in the social sector, in the sector of education, agriculture, health, also in the sector of energy and infrastructure. So it was supposed to be completed in 3 phases. So I'm going to go a little bit on the history side. It started back in 2013. I mean, the project was always there in the pipelines, but the real work started after 2013. During the first phase, the goal was to remove the key economic bottlenecks. And those bottlenecks existed in 2 primary sectors. The first sector is infrastructure, and the second sector is energy. You see, infrastructure is very important. If you don't have roadways, if you don't have the networks of connectivity, you cannot possibly, you cannot possibly expect to have the kind of social mobility, whether horizontal or vertical. You cannot have that. So roadways and railways and other infrastructural projects for connecting the entire country and this side to that side, it's very important. So right now, more than 1,544 kilometers of road has been completed, specifically under the CPAC projects, and another additional 1,400 kilometers of road is near completion. Similarly, in the energy sector, it goes,
So restricting to the infrastructure part, we are done with 1,544 kilometers.
Yes.
And we are about to accomplish another 1,400 kilometers. That is adding to infrastructure of Pakistan.
Yes.
All right.
Which will add to the connectivity of the country, which will create opportunities for the population.
Improve the connection between the industry and the port.
So the concept is
the second part you were saying was about energy.
Yeah. So in energy sector, we have been able to add more than 5,000 megawatts of
into the system,
electricity into the national grid of Pakistan, and an additional 4,000 plus megawatt is again under construction. The projects are still under construction and they are near completion. So that's a huge
a jump of 9,000 megawatts for Pakistan right away.
Exactly. So we also need to understand that the spells of load shedding that we faced, right now I believe Pakistan does not have an issue of generation of electricity. The production is not an issue. The issue lies somewhere else. It's mostly to do with the old-fashioned or outdated distribution systems and circular debt and stuff like that. So in terms of development on the CPAC, we are on track. There were some perceptions earlier that maybe the projects have been shelved, the pace has been slow, but as Mr. Abrar was also mentioning, the entire world just went through a very unprecedented crisis of pandemic. The situation of pandemic, we faced that after a century. So that was a time when the entire global economy came to stand still, and Pakistan was no exception.
But Faizan, going forward, as you have pointed out, that when it comes to infrastructure and energy, which I believe energy is also part of the infrastructure that you require for industry, We are already on track and we are completing it within the given timelines. But going forward, how do you see CPAC changing the fortune of this country? Because we have to actually target towards the stage where the Chinese industry comes in and start, providing jobs to the local and become a manufacturing hub for Pakistan. How far we are from that dream?
Yeah, I think this is the second big criticism, in the list of the criticisms that CPEC faces. This is the second big one, that somehow it is going to eliminate the local industries, somehow it is going to negatively impact our own local markets. But we need to understand that right now we are in the second phase, for example, and this second phase involves, the projects of agricultural cooperation, massive industrialization, and also, development of businesses and consolidation of development. So this was only possible if we had removed the bottlenecks that we have to a great extent. So right now we're in the second phase. We need to understand that we are, in a position geostrategically that we've been fortunate enough to have this opportunity where instead of competing with our products, China is cooperating, on so many levels. I'll just pose the question: do you think a market like India can compete with the Chinese products? Even USA cannot compete with the Chinese products. So I think that entire argument is based on a fallacy.
India is rather one of the largest importers from China.
Exactly. So what I mean to say is that to make an argument that somehow the Chinese products are going to destroy, the Chinese investments are going to destroy our local products.
No, but my question is, my question is that since it is also a part of the project that the Chinese investment has to actually come here, how far, I'm not talking about any criticism, how far we are from that stage and how soon we can expect that?
Getting to that. So right now in the second phase, we are trying to consolidate developments, we are trying to encourage investments. The key is investments. We need investments. And this is not just a partnership between China and Pakistan, and this has been projected for a very long time. Pakistan has been saying this, and it has been encouraging other nation states and other businesses and partnerships to come and collaborate in this project and become a part of this project. We need the investments. Once the investments start coming in, there will be a lot of output. For example, the special economic zones. Right now, they are also under progress and they are near completion. 3 of them are, and the rest are still under plan. Once all of the special economic zones are activated, we would be able to have somewhere around 700,000 to a million jobs. And these jobs are not just menial labor based jobs. These are highly skilled manpower jobs. So we'll be adding somewhere around 100 million skilled manpower to our country. And you see, we have a lot of things that work for us. We have a huge population bulge. We just need to focus our efforts in the right direction. We need to build a knowledge-based economy. My entire argument is that we need to build an economy which is based on skills, which is based on tapping the unconventional opportunities that we have not tapped.
Faizan, like always, you have been spot on, and we have discussed a number of areas. Since we are in the last 60 seconds of the program, what should be the takeaway for the viewers of this show? How would you conclude this conversation and tell them something that they are not aware of at the moment?
Okay, so I think the biggest takeaway would be that we need to work hard to create surplus. If we really need to come out of the economic conditions that we are in right now, we need to create surplus. We have free trade agreements with China, but in order to have some trade, you need to have some products. So that products could also only be created if we have, if we have the knowledge of the demand of the market. So we cannot go on doing business as we used to do before. The conventional market is soon depleting, it's shortening. So we need to widen our horizon, and we need to work on the unconventional side of the business. Only then we can prosper, and also we need to understand that sometimes we should be aware of the popular misconception, that we should be able to separate the reality from superstition or from.
We can only do that with the help of experts like yourself.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Faizan, for being guest in our program. Ladies and gentlemen, as Faizan Fakhr identified, there are a list of issues that we need to address. Most importantly, in today's modern day and time, When the entire global economy is opening up, there are abundant opportunities of trade, particularly for a country like Pakistan that sits next to China, which is one of the largest markets in the world. Yes, we are exporters of agricultural product, and China is one of the largest importers of agricultural product from the world. We just need to broaden our horizon, as said by my last guest in the program, to untap the potential that China has to offer at this point of their national history, when they are being led by the third largest leader of their national history. We'll join you next week with another program. And until then, Allah Hafiz.